We are back. We are back with our friend David Bishop, partner at Brick Meets Click. David, how are you doing?
Mark, I'm doing well on this Friday afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm surviving the Halloween candy that's been floating around the house. So
That's good. I'm just noshing on the things that my wife doesn't find edible.
very good. We have a new report to talk about. We have October Insights, October 2022.
That's right, Mark. There's always things to talk about with you and the industry, whether it's on the monthly insights or what's in general happening in the industry and abroad.
So, for those who like watching these videos, and there are some of you out there, we're happy to bring these productions to you. David, what is the data that you're looking at month over month? What are the top three takeaways that you're seeing consistently?
That's a good question, Mark. So, if I had to think about takeaways on the spot, since I didn't know this question beforehand, one is again, we're settling into these new realities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Put aside for a moment whether the business is up or down this month versus a year ago. It continues to stabilize at this elevated base. So, if you haven't retested your assumptions about the role that online plays, um, you probably should soon. I think second, we continue to see various factors in the market kind of providing tailwinds for certain segments like delivery. And while in the near term it may show delivery has some stronger growth performance versus pickup, I think we don't want to lose sight for what is the predominantly preferred method for receiving online orders, whether it's pickup or delivery. It's clearly on pickup, so we don't want to lose sight of that, and we want to keep the focus on the prize. And I think the third is in order to increase our market share or do a better job with our existing customers so we can
Mm-hmm.
focus less on trying to acquire new customers that may be transient or less loyal. We really need to focus on that experience, right? And so each month we share a variety of metrics that give you the big picture, but also put some comparisons out there between grocery and their primary rivals, mass. And I think what's clear is we continue to need to up our game in a variety of ways
Yep. Yep.
because our customers are experiencing or encountering experiences that in some cases are very different than what they see in grocery. And longer term, that's really important to address in order to maintain that level of competitiveness. So those are three takeaways in kind of an unstructured, free flow response to your question.
Do you think the audience that receives this report are they agree with you?
Well, as you know, Mark, it's I'm less concerned whether they agree with me as
Or
opposed to
or
they
do they
or do they understand
do they
what I'm saying.
understand?
We can't have agreement until we first have understanding. Kind of
Right.
a logical principle argument. I think in some ways they do.
Mm-hmm.
And I say I think in some ways because in other ways their behaviors don't expressly reflect that belief. And as a practice, we tend to focus on what people do versus what people say, right? Behaviors are the manifestation of our true beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag still. For whatever set of reasons I can't answer, and it would just be speculative on my part if I tried.
Isn't that interesting? Do you think it's the nature of the industry? And I know you don't want to speculate.
Well, there's certain code words that kind
Mm-hmm.
of can be red flags. Fast follower
Mm-hmm.
is a big one,
Yep.
right? We're a fast follower. So what does that say? Well, we don't lead, we follow, and the implication also is they follow quickly. So that may even be a misnomer, but it's a rationale for why they don't take action as quickly or as boldly as they maybe should. And it's a way for them to express a degree of agreement
Mm-hmm.
while also kind of tamping down the expectations that they're going to actually do what they agreed probably needs to be done.
Yeah.
Right. So that kind of goes to commitment and conviction and culture. If it's a boss said culture and the boss says one thing and everyone lines up against it, then that's a pretty powerful motivation working against change. If it is a culture that really is leaning into customer centricity and test and learning, and recognizing not necessarily the power of first mover, but just the power of continuous improvement,
Yeah.
then you'd have a different outcome.
You had mentioned how important it is to have a consistent customer experience, and one that is also an extension of your brand promise, the one that you make for your in-store customers and how it needs to be reflected online. Is that message getting through?
Again, for a good and the bad, yes and no.
Yeah.
I think there's this acknowledgement that we need to do a better job for our customers, but I think the fact remains that surprisingly many retailers don't fully understand who their customers are. Instead, they kind of chase the customer. The problem with that is if you chase the customer and you believe that that requires you to play by the same rules as, let's say, mass, you're likely going to lose because you're playing to their strengths. If you really do understand your customers, you may understand and come to appreciate that they value different things in different ways, right? Online traditionally has appealed to the sense of convenience as opposed to cost. It's not to say cost isn't important. It's more important to a subset of customers, and those customers tend to kind of pool themselves into certain channels, right, that are the value players. It's not to say you don't have those customers in grocery. It's just they make up a proportion of them. And let's keep in mind, it's no different than the physical world. If everyone wants the lowest cost, everyone will be shopping at one store.
Right.
But they don't. And the reason they don't is because there are other stores that are more conveniently located and or have an experience or a range of quality products that people desire. And those are points of differentiation that compete not on, on the price variable, but more so some of the experiential service aspects. So it's really not that much different when you move into the digital world to understand, within the value equation, which variables are more important to your customers. To answer that question, the first thing you need to understand is who are my customers?
Right.
How are they different than maybe some of the other retailers that I'm competing against?
Do you think retailers perceive online grocery still as an acquisition game, or do they understand it's more about retention?
I don't think they necessarily would say either for the most part, believe it or not. I think it's more of still has been in many ways a defensive reaction, right? It's protect the base business. Where's the base business? It's in the store. If the store is leaking sales and those sales are going online, now we see retailers saying the reason we want to be online is to better serve that customer that has left our store. And that is more of a kind of reactionary move to, again, that sales leakage. When they look at the customer online, there is this growing appetite to bring in more and more customers. But as we've talked about before, Mark, there needs to be kind of a counterbalance that maybe weights even more to nurturing that existing customer, right? I mean, we have customers that we are not sure are lapsed or just infrequent. People who come in and out maybe every other month. And in grocery, that is pretty close to lapse because we're making grocery trips, whether it's online or in store, multiple times a week. So a retailer who's hooked a customer who's come to their online shop and just isn't as active and on a frequency basis, they need to think about how can we motivate a change behavior there as opposed to simply going and trying to hook the next customer, right? Because they're going to have the same issue going forward. So this kind of goes back to knowing your customers, focusing on improving that overall experience, knowing where that experience needs to improve, whether it's improving the visibility of in-stock availability to really working smarter with how you do substitutions, to how you fulfill orders, to in one place take costs out of the system, but in another vein to deliver a consistent experience that customers will come to expect and rely on.
There's one, and I appreciate that answer. There's one data point that I'm looking at as and is trending over time, and that is the declining monthly frequency of the online shop. So can you get into the reasons why you think that's happening?
Yeah. So, and that's a really good point. We saw that across the board, meaning across all three segments:
Yeah.
delivery, pickup, and ship to home. And in a binary world that is online and offline, obviously, a declining order frequency would suggest that they may be shifting a degree of the orders or trips back into the store.
Mm-hmm.
That's somewhat intuitive. I think the other interpretation of it is that if we look at the 3A's growth framework that looks at availability, attractiveness, and acceptability, the acceptability maybe has waned as the appeal or attractiveness of shopping online has dissipated as COVID recedes or as inflation persists. It's a dynamic, fluid situation. So, at a macro level, that is the U.S. market, we're seeing the softening, which could indicate a return to store or simply a slight softening of the value proposition that's kind of relevant on a kind of a circumstantial basis. And today, the circumstances are, prices are high, even though they've softened a little bit on a year over year. And COVID is less of a concern this year versus last year, although we're just at the early part of the winter cycle. So we could expect COVID cases to go up, which would raise concerns that could bring some people back in terms of frequency. And if depending on what happens with inflation, as we expect it to continue, we'll continue to see some adjustments because people can only buy so much with what they have in their wallet, and when prices eat at their purchasing power, they're going to have to make choices at some point.
So, David, I got one more question. What do you see retailers prioritizing, at least strategically, as they go into their next fiscal year when it comes to online?
Yeah, I really think you have to look at how do we improve the experience. But the reason why we want to improve the experience is we want to improve the profitability. And the cost to serve an existing customer is far less post acquisition than it is to acquire a new customer. So one reason we want to improve the experience is it improves the likelihood that those people are going to return. And we know kind of the rule of 3 or 4 is once they've established that new pattern, especially within a month or two in terms of the frequency, then their chances of reusing and continue to use it increase, as well as the spending with it. So the loyalty effects accrue in the form of higher order frequency, as well as average order spend, and the less likely that they're going to switch because it's this dissatisfaction with some element of the service that opens someone up to consider their alternatives, whether that's a competing service or whether it's simply, is it time for me to go back to the store? So I think, retailers, as they really kind of tighten down the hatches here and say, how do we make a stronger run in 2023, recognizing mass is doing a lot already, is you really got to block and tackle on those fundamentals with a much more intensified focus on profitability, right? And that's kind of to the notion you brought the saying, working smarter and not harder, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you see anything like that, analogous to that from your perspective, but those are some of the things we would anticipate going into the next kind of business cycle.
Yeah, I think it depends on the retailer that you're talking to. And this goes back to the conversation we had earlier in this chat about those who lead versus those who follow. And I think focusing on the fundamentals, making sure that the service and the operational execution of that service is top notch before you start focusing on other less tangible components of the online experience.
Exactly.
Adding new services, adding new features that may not necessarily help you as you try to retain the online shopper.
Yeah, I mean, the good news or the bad news, depending on how you look at it, means cup half full or half empty, is there are plenty of opportunities to improve performance and profitability. It's not easy, as you know. There's a lot of parts. Strategy is a key component, and strategy is about making choices, not only what to do, but more importantly, what not to do.
Exactly.
We still have those shiny objects that can distract even the executives and the teams. So having a solid understanding who your customer is, where you compete in that market for that customer's dollars, and how you think you can better serve that customer, through your own set of capabilities and services is really kind of an essential component. It's maybe not sexy, or it's maybe overly generalized and simplifying a very complex topic, but at the end of the day, those are the type of things that people have to focus on.
Very good. Anything you want to mention before we wrap it up today? What's coming down the pike?
I just think just coming down the pike, besides the ongoing monthly insights, as you know, Mark, we're going to be releasing soon our 5-year sales forecast. That sales forecast will not only look at what the 5-year growth rate on a CAGR basis will be for online, but subsequently also for grocery in general. So we're looking forward to sharing those insights. I know we've kind of teased some things on back and forth between you and I as we finish and finalize that preparation. But we're looking forward to getting that out in the next few weeks.
Awesome. David, as always, it's my pleasure. I wish you and your family a very happy Thanksgiving, and we'll be back in December.
Excellent, Mark. Same to you, and I appreciate, as always, the opportunity to chat on the topic and share some insights and perspective.
Fantastic. Bye, folks.